Hi, this is Thor Peterson with Crow. Thanks so much for joining me on this recorded session. This is a follow-up video to our RCA User Community series session on analyzing VA10 using the RCA AdHoc reporting module and Tableau. So that session was cut a little short due to some technical difficulties. Apologies for that. In this video, we're going to overview a dashboard that we created on our VA10 extract. We're going to step-by-step go through building that specific Tableau dashboard. We're going to build the working bits and pieces on that and put it together, but then follow up with a second video on formatting and cleaning things up in the dashboard. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to jump into my VA10 summary dashboard here. So you'll notice we've got a few different parts here. We've got a worksheet here that shows us rate, mix, volume, change in prior, and our total variance on net revenue from our base period, which is current month, to our comparison period, which is prior month. We're grouping this by source facility and by inpatient, outpatient type. And then down here, we're showing a couple different measures, comparison measures, where we're grouping by financial class, we're sorting by gross revenue in descending order, and gross revenue for our base period. So Medicare is our largest financial class in terms of gross revenue for January 31. And here we're showing our base period rate, our comparison period rate, that change between the two, as well as our base period mix and our comparison mix. So this is just a way for us to get a summary level idea of where our rate, mix, volume, and change in prior stand at month end for, say, Atlanta, looking at our inpatient, outpatient type, and then diving into some of our financial classes to see how the rates and mixes compare from base to comparison. So here we can see, we had a 0.2% reduction in our rate. Looking at our base gross revenue versus our comparison gross revenue, you can see that we've got, looks like just under a $3 million reduction there. And then on our net, about a little over almost $350,000 reduction in our net revenue there. So just some information at a high level to help us ask some targeted questions around what's happening with our Medicaid, HMO, financial class in the Atlanta outpatient dimensions there. So also looking at our description here, we can compare different base and comparison periods. So of course we've got to have the VA10 data stored to support these periods. So I can look at current month versus prior, click on current month versus trend, even look at a fiscal year versus prior month fiscal year or prior year fiscal year. And then we've got quarter comparisons as well. So we've got a lot of different options here for analysis to compare different types of VA10 results. So let's go ahead and jump into the data here real quick. And so I'm going to go over to an open or a blank sheet here and make sure that I'm connected to my appropriate data sources here. So I'm connected to our demo site, and I'm going to go ahead and connect to a server for data, and then searching for my VA10 data set here. And if you've got the RCA AdHoc reporting module and Tableau, and you don't see the VA10 data set here, give me a shout. We can certainly configure your system to include this just with a flip of a switch. So I'll click sheet 1 here to get started. And so let's dive into this data. So our RCA, our VA10 RCA extract here, there are a few dimensions that we want to focus on here real quick to make this dashboard work. And so our calculations are done at different grains. And so specifically, we want to start with our methods. So looking at our methods here, we can calculate volume and mix using cases, charges, or days. So we want to be sure to select one of these three. And of course, we've also got to make sure that we're capturing cases and days in your RCA data in order for this to work. But on our demo data set, we've only got the charges. So I'm going to go ahead and keep just the charges. The next field we want to look at is our payer type. And so in this case, we can choose either financial class or insurance provider. I'll tell you that the calculation is done at the financial class. Generally, I filter on financial class here. And then if I want to look at the variables or components that go into calculating rate, mix, and volume, I'll look at insurance plan in order to kind of see what might be driving things. But the actual rate, mix, and volume calculations do not compute at the insurance plan level. We're running this at the financial class level, or in some cases the SIPG, depending on how you're set up. So let's go ahead and look at the applied pricing dimension here next. And so when you run a VA10, you can select on whether or not you want to apply pricing changes or not. In this case, our demo data set does not have any pricing changes added in there. So I'm going to click no and keep that as well. So now I'm filtered on our charges method, our financial class payer type, and our applied pricing is no. So our last filter is that of our comparison periods, right? So what I want to do here is look at our period type ID. I'll drop this on the rows so that I can see these are all integers here. So that's a code. I need to actually interpret that code. So I've got a calculated field that I'm going to create here. So I'll go to create calculated field, and I want to paste this code in here. So this is a calculation. It's an if statement that essentially just says if the type ID is a certain value, then it is this description, right? So I want to show these descriptions when the IDs are these specific values, okay? So I'll name this period type description and make sure I spell it right. All right, so I'll click OK here. And so now dragging this period type description up to the rows shelf, now I can see how these can correspond to one another, okay? Perfect. So I want to bring this over to my filters as well. And for this example, I'm going to go ahead and just click current month versus trend, but we'll be able to change that filter down the road. So let's go ahead and click OK here to get things started. And then I'm going to clear this off of my rows shelf by clicking remove. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is I want to apply these filters across every sheet that I create so that when I click the filter, I only have to click it once for all the sheets. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to right click, apply to worksheets, all using this data source, and I'll repeat that for all of these. Okay, perfect. So next, let's go ahead and get started building our worksheet. So the first piece we want to build is the sheet that shows our rate, mix, volume, change in prior, and total variance by source facility. So let's go ahead and start with source facility. I'm going to drag that up to rows. Next, I'm going to look for my measures, impact, change in gross revenue. So I'll double click there. Impact, prior estimates, impact, change in realization rate, and impact, change in payer mix. Okay, so then what I can do is I can actually drag this border down a little bit so that I can see more, right? So this is my gross, my change in gross, change in prior estimates, change in rate, change in mix. Okay, let's add our total there. So we're going to click on analysis here on the menu bar, find totals, and show column grand totals. Okay, All right, cool. So let's go ahead and name this sheet down here just by double clicking there. We're going to name this VA summary by source facility. Okay. All right. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to create the same sheet for inpatient, outpatient type. So let's do that. So I'm going to right click here, click duplicate, and then find my in-out type, drag this to source facility. All right, and so now I've got inpatient, outpatient type. So essentially what I did is I just dragged the dimension right over the top of the old pill and it replaces it. All right, so then I'll rename this sheet VA summary by in-out type. Okay, perfect. So then let's go ahead and create our next sheet, which is going to show us the change in rate and the change in mix. And so there are a few things that we need to get started there. Number one, we need to create a calculation that calculates our rate. Okay, so we've got base gross revenue, and we've got base gross revenue less total deductions. We've got comparison gross revenue and comparison gross revenue less total deductions. So let's go ahead and create that calculated field. All right, and I'm just going to paste this in here. So what I'm doing is I'm summing my gross revenue less total deductions divided by the sum of base gross revenue. And I'm going to give this calculated field a name. And we're going to call it base gross revenue less total deductions rate, or percent. So I'll click OK here, and you'll notice that it falls right below my other measure here. So they're right in line here. That's why I try to name them similar so that we can keep them well or organized here. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this by right-clicking, duplicate, and now we're going to make a version for our comparison. So right-click, edit. So I'm editing this copy that I just made, and so I can just substitute comparison for base and comparison for base, remove copy, and then change base to comparison. Okay, easy as that. So I'll click OK there. And so then what I can do next is go ahead and add my payer name to the view. So I'll double click payer name. You'll notice my filters come across. Find base gross revenue less total deductions percent, and comparison gross revenue less total deductions percent. And I will mention that we can go ahead and format these as percent by default. So let's do that real quick. So right click, default properties, number format, percent, and click OK. Same thing for comparison. All right. So then the last thing I want to do here with our rate is calculate the difference between the two. Okay. So let's start with our base gross revenue less total deductions percent. Right click, create calculated field, minus, and find our comparison gross revenue rate. And then we'll give this a name. And what I'll do is copy this, paste it here, and then add change to the end. And let's right click on this one so that we can change the number format by default. Okay. So now that we've got that on there, we can go ahead and drop it on. And we notice now that we've got, 62.94% compared to 60.89% gives us a 2.05%. And so also recognize that some of these may have a little bit of a rounding error on there. So for the most part, going into 2 decimals should provide us with a good, accurate comparison. But if you want to be more precise, feel free to move the decimals out or in, depending on your own perspective. Okay, so that's the base gross versus the comparison gross and the change. Next thing we want to do is we want to calculate the mix. So base gross revenue mix is going to, base gross revenue, we're going to drag that, add it to the measure values card, and then find comparison gross revenue, add that to the measures card. Okay, so we've got our gross amount by payer. We can calculate the mix here by adding a simple table calculation. Percent of total, and then we'll do the same thing, percent of total. All right, and so you'll notice that Tableau automatically put this into a percent, and that's just by, by virtue of choosing percent of total. It knows that we want to see an actual percent here, right? So the next thing we want to do is calculate the difference between the two. And to do that, what we want to do is create the calculated field and store it in our measures, right? So just by clicking and dragging this over, now we can call this base gross revenue mix, okay? Press enter, and then I'll do the same thing with my comparison. Comparison gross revenue mix, okay? And so just taking a peek here to see what the formula looks like, here you'll see that, Tableau created that formula for us, so we didn't have to think about what we needed to do there, okay? All right, perfect. So now that we've got these two, we're going to calculate the change in mix, okay? So we're going to start with base gross revenue mix, right click, create calculated field, and we'll add the minus sign there, and then bring in comparison. Name this base gross revenue mix change, okay? So far we've got a good working model here on our worksheet for our comparisons. So let's go ahead and drag this over. So we've got all of our measure names. We'll want to go ahead and change this format. So on my base gross revenue mix change, right click, default properties, number format, percentage. All right, so now we're all set. And we can grab this top border here and drag that down a little bit so that we can get a better sense for what these represent. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. A little bit further yet. All right, so that works. So now we can see what those changes are, and we'll go over how to alias these in the next video. Okay, so let's go ahead and name this. Let's see, this is going to be revenue comparison. Too many E's. Okay, revenue comparison. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started on our dashboard. Okay, so I'm going to open a new blank dashboard, and so then let's go ahead and drop in our VA summary by source facility, our VA summary by in-out type, and our revenue comparison at the bottom. Okay, so I want the revenue comparison to take up the entire width of this space. Come up here to standard, click fit width. Okay. The next thing that I'd like to do is drag this top border up so that it aligns and it's closer to my source facility. We actually don't need this title, so I'll right click this, hide that title. Gives us a little bit more space for our revenue comparison. Okay, we could actually add the filter for our period types, period type descriptions. So clicking on one of these objects, since that filter is in all three, we'll go ahead and click analysis up on the toolbar. Select filters, payer type description. Okay, so it landed here in this container. I don't need the container. I'd actually like to move this over so that it's right next to this source facility sheet. So I'll grab that handle, and now it's landed right here on the right side of this object, and we've recovered some of that space. Okay. I can grab this border and drag it to the left a little bit so that I can see my entire selection there. So now I've got a good working model here. I can see my volume, change in prior, rate, mix. Looks like I forgot to add the total, but we can add that back in really easily. So let's do that. So coming over here to this little drop down, we'll go to sheet, and let's add on measures, let's add total variance to the measure values card. Okay, and we'll do the same thing for the in-out type. Total variance. Okay, that looks good. All right, excellent. Back to our dashboard. So we've got our total variance here as well. Okay, we can change the order on these if we want. So for example, this is volume, change in prior, rate, mix. So if we want to move rate over to the left and mix over to the left and change in prior, can stay where it is. So we've got rate, mix, volume, change in prior. So let's move rate over to the left, mix over to the left, volume, change in prior, total variance. Okay, so everything lines up here. Excellent. So, so this is a good start. What I'd like to do next is add in the interactivity. So when I click on Atlanta, we see all of these filters. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go up to Dashboard, Actions, Add Action, Filter Action. And so we'll call this Source Facility. We're going to run it on Select. We're going to use our VA summary by source facility as a source sheet. And then we're going to target the other sheets excluding our source facility. And selected fields, click Add. Our field is going to be, yep, you guessed it, source facility. Click OK and click OK. I'll also add inpatient, outpatient. So add action, filter, in, out, type, run on select. I'm going to unselect these two because I want to run this by selecting something in the in-out type sheet. And then the target sheets that receive the filter are going to be those that are not the in-out type. So you can see the relationship there. I'll click selected fields, add filter, drop down our source field, which is in-out type. And then the target field is also in-out type. So now click OK, click OK. And so now when I click Atlanta, the whole sheet filters. When I click inpatient, the whole sheet filters. I can switch to a different comparison here. I can switch to current fiscal to date or to current quarter to date. So really the choice is yours on what you want to compare here, but you should only have one comparison, okay? So that pretty much does it for this specific dashboard. We could also, we can give this a name, call this VA10 Summary Dashboard. And then of course we want to click Save, right? So give that a save. Put it in a spot where you can get back to it, because we're going to follow up with a formatting video that'll help us make this look a little cleaner and give us some interactivity that we didn't previously have. So as always, if you've got questions, feel free to give me a call. I can be reached by email or at my direct office number or my cell phone number. So hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to fill in some feedback or make some comments down below in the comment section around the Hive, and look for the follow-up video. Thanks so much.